The night is thick with darkness, and the air feels heavy, like the world is holding its breath. Beneath the full moon's chilling glow, I step closer to the edge of the forest, the trees standing like silent sentinels. A thick fog creeps along the ground, swallowing the path behind me as I venture deeper into the unknown. The wind picks up, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and something older, something unnatural. As the branches groan in the distance, a sound cuts through the silence, low, guttural, almost like a whisper. I freeze, my heart pounding in my chest. Something stirs in the shadows. Not a person, not an animal, but something much more ancient, something that's been waiting for centuries to rise again. I feel its eyes on me, watching, waiting, and in that moment, I realize I'm not just standing on the edge of a forest. I'm standing on the edge of a nightmare. Tonight, I'm going to reveal the terrifying truth about the werewolf. It's not a tale spun from myth. It's a creature born from blood, war, and the darkest corners of the human soul. And once you know the truth, there's no escaping the horror that's about to unfold. Stay close, because once the beast is unleashed, there's no turning back. It begins with a sound, a howl that splits the night in two. The kind that makes your blood freeze, even if you're safe behind locked doors. For centuries, that sound has haunted humanity. The call of something untamed, something ancient. The werewolf. Not just a monster of folklore, but a mirror reflecting everything we fear in ourselves. In every culture touched by moonlight, there's a story of transformation. A man who loses his shape, his mind, his soul, until only the beast remains. But the werewolf is not simply born from superstition. It is the embodiment of a question that has stalked humanity since the dawn of civilization. What happens when the animal inside us breaks free? The image is universal, a lone figure beneath a pale moon, trembling as bones crack and skin tears. The agony of metamorphosis, the ecstasy of release. The myth of the werewolf is the myth of losing control, a primal fear buried deep within the human heart. Because no matter how far we've come, part of us still remembers what it means to hunt, to bite, to kill. The ancient world saw wolves as both sacred and cursed. They were symbols of courage, chaos, and wild freedom. But when men began to fear the wilderness, when the forest turned dark and unknown, the wolf became something else entirely, a symbol of everything outside the village walls, everything untamed, everything monstrous. In the medieval night, when moonlight was the only guide and shadows whispered like spirits, people believed in things that blurred the line between man and animal. Farmers would swear they saw a neighbor creeping through the fields on all fours. Travelers would vanish, their torn remains found days later. And always, someone would whisper, it was a werewolf. The church called it a sin. Science called it madness. But to those who heard the howl, it was something far more real, a force that could not be explained, only feared. They believed that the curse of the wolf could be caught like disease, passed through blood, bite, or even a dark oath made beneath a full moon. The werewolf became more than a story. It became a warning, a reminder that the beast within is never fully gone, that under the right moon, under the right rage, any man could turn. And so the howl echoes through time, from ancient superstition to modern scream, from whispered folklore to the pounding heart of legend. It calls us back to a truth we keep trying to forget. The monster we fear most has always been human. Long before silver bullets and full moons, the legend of the werewolf began not as horror, but as divine punishment. In the dust of ancient Mesopotamia, cradle of civilization, lies the first recorded tale of a man turned into a wolf. It was written in the Epic of Gilgamesh, carved in clay thousands of years ago. A goddess named Ishtar, furious with a mortal shepherd who had once loved her, cursed him to roam the wild as a wolf. His crime, daring to touch the divine. His punishment, to be cast out from man, condemned to howl forever in loneliness. That story set the tone for every werewolf tale that would follow, transformation as retribution. To be a wolf was not a gift, it was exile, a stripping away of humanity until nothing but instinct remained. The Greeks would later give that exile a name, Lycanthropy, from the tale of King Lycaon of Arcadia. Lycaon was a ruler known for arrogance and cruelty. When the god Zeus came to test him, Lycaon tried to deceive the king of the gods, serving him a meal made from human flesh. Zeus saw the crime, his fury ignited, and he unleashed a curse that would echo for eternity. Lycaon's skin stretched, his teeth lengthened. His body contorted until the man was gone, and in his place stood the first true werewolf, half human, half beast, doomed to prowl the wilderness in eternal hunger. To the Greeks, this transformation was moral justice, divine punishment for defying heaven's order. But the myth carried something more sinister beneath the surface. It whispered of mankind's hidden nature, the idea that savagery lives inside us all, waiting for a spark to set it free. The Romans carried the legend forward, reshaping it with their fascination for metamorphosis. In Ovid's Metamorphoses, the curse of Lycaon becomes a parable, a warning against pride and cannibalism, but also a reflection of transformation itself. Every change, Ovid wrote, begins within. The beast is already there, the magic only brings it to light. From these early civilizations, the image of the wolfman grew teeth. In them, the werewolf was not a monster. Born from darkness, he was made by gods, condemned for human sin. He symbolized what happens when the boundaries between mortal and divine, reason and instinct, are crossed. But the curse did not die with the ancients. It spread through empire, through legend, through blood. As civilizations rose and fell, one truth remained. The idea that man could become beast haunted every corner of the world. And so, from the sands of Babylon to the hills of Arcadia, the curse lived on, growing stronger, darker, and more human with each retelling. Because in every age, in every faith, the same fear lingered, that the line separating man from monster is thinner than we dare to believe. Not every man who turned into a wolf was cursed. Some chose it. In the frozen north, long before Europe's witch hunts or medieval superstition, there were warriors who believed the wolf spirit could be summoned, worn, and controlled. They were called Ulfhevnar, the wolfskins. To their enemies, they were monsters. To their people, they were gods of war. The Norse sagas speak of them in trembling awe. These men wrapped themselves in wolf pelts before battle, chanting ancient invocations as their eyes rolled back and their voices howled. The transformation that followed was not physical, but spiritual. They moved like predators, silent and merciless. They fought without fear, without mercy, as if possessed by something beyond human understanding. Their frenzy was legendary. They tore through shield walls with bare hands, bit into flesh, and shrugged off pain as if they were carved from iron. When the bloodlust took over, even their comrades feared them. To face such a man on the battlefield was to meet death itself. And when the rage subsided, they remembered nothing. To the Norse, this was not madness, it was sacred. Odin, the Allfather, was the god of both wisdom and war, and he was said to have his own wolf companions, Jerry and Freki. To channel the wolf was to walk closer to Odin's power, to embrace the animal strength that slept within the human frame. The wolf, in their eyes, was not a symbol of evil. It was endurance, survival, dominance. But like all powers born from darkness, it came with a price. The Ulfhevnar could not always return from the wildness they invoked. Many were said to lose themselves, completely unable to shed the beast once battle ended. The sagas whisper of warriors who wandered into the forests, never seen again, condemned to roam as wolves for eternity. The transformation of man into beast even voluntarily carried deep spiritual danger. It wasn't just about fury, it was about surrender. To become a wolf was to give yourself to the wild, to silence the voice of civilization. In that sense, the berserker and the cursed werewolf were reflections of the same truth. Once you unleash the beast, you may never control it again. When Christianity reached the north, the Ulfhednar were condemned as demons. The sacred became sinful. The ritual became curse. Yet the myth of the wolf warrior refused to die. It slithered through time, merging with new beliefs, new fears, until the world forgot the warriors who wore the wolf skin and remembered only the monsters who were forced to. But in the echoes of Norse war drums and midnight howls, a single truth endures. The werewolf was never just born of magic. He was forged in blood, in battle, and in the hunger of man to become something more than human and far less. The forests of medieval Europe were not places of wonder. They were places of fear, dark, endless, and alive with things that shouldn't be. It was in those shadows that the legend of the werewolf began to fester, no longer as a warrior's gift, but as a curse sent from hell itself. By the Middle Ages, Europe was gripped by superstition. Wolves were already seen as creatures of the devil, scavengers that crept into villages, tore through livestock, and vanished into the mist. To the church, such beasts weren't just animals. They were instruments of temptation, symbols of man's fall from grace. So when tales began to spread of people turning into wolves, they weren't treated as myths, but as heresy. The transformation was no longer a ritual or a blessing. It was punishment, divine retribution for sin. A man who broke moral law could find himself cursed, stripped of his humanity, and doomed to roam as a beast beneath the moon. In these stories, the werewolf was not just a monster. He was a warning. And Europe listened. Villagers began to whisper of strange tracks outside their homes, sheep slaughtered with unnatural precision, eyes glowing from the tree line. Fear spread like wildfire, and fear needed a face, someone to blame. So came the werewolf trials. Yes, trials. From France to Germany, men and women were accused of being wolves in human skin. They were tortured until they confessed to running through the forests, feasting on flesh, and serving Satan himself. Some even believed their own guilt, convinced that under some cursed spell or ointment, they truly had changed. The line between imagination and reality blurred until it disappeared completely. The most infamous of these cases came from 16th century France, Gilles Garnier, the werewolf of Dole. A reclusive hermit accused of murdering children, he confessed under torture to transforming into a wolf with the help of an enchanted salve. He was burned at the stake, and the crowd cheered, as if killing him could silence the howl in their hearts. The werewolf had become the perfect scapegoat, the embodiment of everything the church feared: lust, rage, wilderness, rebellion. In a world that demanded obedience, the idea of a man becoming a wolf, wild, uncontrollable, primal, was the ultimate act of defiance. But there was something else beneath the fear, something no priest would ever admit. The werewolf fascinated them because he represented what they all secretly wanted: freedom from the chains of society, from guilt, from control, to run wild, to answer to no one, to be the beast. The church called it blasphemy. The people called it horror. But deep down, everyone understood the truth. The werewolf wasn't just cursed by the devil, he was born from the heart of man himself. Europe was drowning in fear. The forests hid monsters, the moonlight revealed sins, and the church's grip on the human mind was absolute. But when people looked for evil, they didn't always find it in demons. Sometimes they saw it in each other. Thus began one of the darkest chapters in European history, the werewolf trials. Much like the witch hunts, these trials were fueled by hysteria, religion, and the desperate need to explain tragedy. When crops failed, when livestock vanished, when bodies were found mutilated, the whispers began. A wolf, they said. No, a man-wolf. Someone must have made a pact with the devil, someone nearby, someone human. The first major cases erupted in France and Germany during the 15th to 17th centuries. They were horrifying not only for their brutality, but for how ordinary they began. A child disappears. A shepherd finds footprints too large for a wolf, too strange for a man. And suddenly, neighbors begin pointing fingers. Fear spreads, accusations multiply, and before long, someone is dragged before the magistrate. One of the most infamous trials took place in 1589, the case of Peter Stump. The Werewolf of Bedburg. A quiet farmer by all accounts, Stump was accused of unspeakable crimes, cannibalism, black magic, and murder. Under torture, he confessed to using a magic belt that allowed him to transform into a wolf at will. He described hunting children, tearing out throats, even devouring his own kin. It didn't matter that his confession was wrung from agony. It was enough. Stump was executed brutally, wheel, fire, and sword as his village watched. His death was meant to cleanse the land of evil, but instead, it fed the myth. And Stump was not alone. Hundreds across Europe, men, women, and even children were accused of lycanthropy. In France's Jura Mountains, 3 beggars were burned alive for allegedly attacking travelers as wolves. In Estonia, peasants confessed to joining night hunts as spectral wolves. In Switzerland, whole families were executed for shape-shifting witchcraft. The stories blurred the line between folklore and frenzy until no one could tell truth from terror. The trials reveal something haunting. These were not monsters on trial. They were people caught in the jaws of mass fear. Outsiders, the poor, the sick, the strange. The very people society had always treated as less than human. The real transformation wasn't theirs, it was the crowd's. When the mob gathered, when the torches burned, it was civilization itself that turned into the beast. By the 17th century, the hysteria began to fade. Science was rising, reason was spreading, but the damage was done. Thousands had died for crimes that existed only in nightmare. And yet, even as the flames of the last pyres died out, the legend lived on. Because deep down, people still believed the howl. And worse, they feared it came from inside themselves. The year was 1764. In the mist-shrouded hills of Gévaudan, a remote region in southern France, something was killing people, something no one could explain. It struck in daylight, dragged victims into the forest, and left behind bodies so mangled that even wolves avoided the remains. Over the next 3 years, more than 100 people would die. The villagers called it La Bête the Beast. No one had ever seen anything like it. Witnesses spoke of a monstrous creature, larger than any wolf, with a reddish mane, a long snout, and eyes that glowed like embers. It moved with intelligence, attacking with precision, often going straight for the throat. It didn't just kill, it hunted. And soon, Gévaudan was drowning in terror. At first, people thought it was a rogue wolf or a pack gone mad, but when the killings continued even after dozens of wolves were slaughtered, the whispers began. It's not a wolf, it's a werewolf. To the villagers, there was no doubt. The sheer brutality of the attacks, the way it toyed with its victims, spoke of something unnatural. Priests claimed it was divine punishment. Hunters said it was a demon. Mothers warned their children not to stray from the path, lest the beast smell their fear. King Louis XV himself took notice. The attacks had become a national crisis and a stain on royal pride. Soldiers were dispatched. Hunters were paid in gold. They combed the forests with muskets, hounds, and holy relics, but the beast always slipped away. It was as if it knew their every move. As panic spread, Gévaudan became a battlefield between faith, fear, and survival. Then, in 1767, a local hunter named Jean Chastel allegedly brought the nightmare to an end. He claimed to have killed the beast with a single silver bullet, a detail that would echo through werewolf lore forever. The body, they said, was massive, part wolf, part something else. But before it could be studied, it rotted away on the journey to Paris. The truth, once again, was swallowed by legend. To this day, no one knows what the beast of Gévaudan really was. Some historians believe it was a hyena brought from Africa, escaped from a noble's menagerie. Others think it was a pack of unusually large wolves. But to the people who lived through it, it didn't matter. They saw a monster. They believed in the curse. And belief has a power stronger than teeth or claws. The story of the beast burned itself into Europe's imagination. It was proof that monsters still walked the earth, and that even reason and empire couldn't banish the darkness lurking in the wild. And when the moon rose over Gévaudan, the people still swore they could hear it. That terrible, lonely howl echoing through the trees. The cry of the beast that refused to die. Long before the moonlight curse or the silver bullet, there were darker stories. Stories of pacts, potions, and spells that bound men to the wolf. In the age of superstition, becoming a werewolf wasn't an accident. It was a choice, a dangerous, desperate act of transformation through forbidden magic. Medieval Europe was obsessed with sorcery, witchcraft, shape-shifting, and the devil's influence were all seen as threads of the same dark tapestry. And the werewolf, more than any other creature, sat right at its center. Legends whispered of men who went into the forest with blood offerings, calling upon the spirits of the wild. They sought strength, vengeance, or freedom, but what they received was far worse. The most common tale spoke of enchanted wolf pelts, cursed skins that could grant the wearer the ability to transform. In some versions, these pelts were gifts from the devil himself, handed to men who pledged loyalty to darkness. In others, they were found by accident, hidden deep in the woods, left behind by another cursed soul. Once worn, the transformation began skin stretching, bones snapping, mind fracturing. The man was gone. Only the beast remained. But not all transformations came from objects. Some came from rituals. Old folklore tells of salves and ointments made from human fat, wolfsbane, and blood rubbed onto the skin under the full moon. Others claim that saying certain incantations while walking naked through moonlight could awaken the wolf within. And in some places, eating the heart of a wolf, or worse, of another human, could curse you with the same bloodlust. To the common folk, these weren't just myths, they were warnings. Parents told children never to wander into the woods after dark, not because of wolves, but because of the men who had become them. Villagers feared that a man wronged by fate might turn to forbidden magic for power. And once he did, there was no turning back. He would walk on 2 legs by day and 4 by night. The church branded these practices as heresy, condemning shapeshifters as servants of Satan. Yet behind the sermons and executions, one truth lingered. People kept believing. Because they saw things they couldn't explain. Because sometimes they heard the growl just beyond the tree line. Because when people went missing, when bones were found scattered in the fields, someone always whispered, "He made a pact." But what if not all of them were driven by evil? Some legends tell of men cursed against their will, punished by witches, betrayed lovers, or angry gods. These unwilling wolves roamed the night begging for mercy, praying that dawn would restore their humanity. Yet dawn never saved them. Whether by choice or curse, the transformation was the same, a surrender of the human soul to something older and hungrier. And that's what made the werewolf legend so terrifying. Because it suggested that anyone, even the most righteous, could fall to the call of the wild if they wanted something badly enough. Long before the moonlight curse or the silver bullet, there were darker stories. Stories of pacts, potions, and spells that bound men to the wolf. In the age of superstition, becoming a werewolf wasn't an accident. It was a choice, a dangerous, desperate act of transformation through forbidden magic. Medieval Europe was obsessed with sorcery, witchcraft, shape-shifting, and the devil's influence were all seen as threads of the same dark tapestry. And the werewolf, more than any other creature, sat right at its center. Legends whispered of men who went into the forest with blood offerings, calling upon the spirits of the wild. They sought strength, vengeance, or freedom, but what they received was far worse. The most common tale spoke of enchanted wolf pelts, cursed skins that could grant the wearer the ability to transform. In some versions, these pelts were gifts from the devil himself, handed to men who pledged loyalty to darkness. In others, they were found by accident, hidden deep in the woods, left behind by another cursed soul. Once worn, the transformation began skin stretching, bones snapping, mind fracturing. The man was gone, only the beast remained. But not all transformations came from objects. Some came from rituals. Old folklore tells of salves and ointments made from human fat, wolfsbane, and blood rubbed onto the skin under the full moon. Others claim that saying certain incantations while walking naked through moonlight could awaken the wolf within. And in some places, eating the heart of a wolf, or worse, of another human, could curse you with the same bloodlust. To the common folk, these weren't just myths, they were warnings. Parents told children never to wander into the woods after dark, not because of wolves, but because of the men who had become them. Villagers feared that a man wronged by fate might turn to forbidden magic for power. And once he did, there was no turning back. He would walk on 2 legs by day and 4 by night. The church branded these practices as heresy, condemning shapeshifters as servants of Satan. Yet behind the sermons and executions, one truth lingered: people kept believing. Because they saw things they couldn't explain. Because sometimes they heard the growl just beyond the tree line. Because when people went missing, when bones were found scattered in the fields, someone always whispered, "He made a pact." But what if not all of them were driven by evil? Some legends tell of men cursed against their will, punished by witches, betrayed lovers, or angry gods. These unwilling wolves roamed the night begging for mercy, praying that dawn would restore their humanity. Yet dawn never saved them. Whether by choice or curse, the transformation was the same: a surrender of the human soul to something older and hungrier. And that's what made the werewolf legend so terrifying. Because it suggested that anyone, even the most righteous, could fall to the call of the wild if they wanted something badly enough. Long before werewolves haunted movies and books, they haunted the courts of Europe. In the 16th and 17th centuries, thousands were accused, tried, and executed, not as witches, but as wolves in human skin. The line between myth and reality blurred in firelight as fear became law. The most infamous case was that of Peter Stump, the so-called Werewolf of Bedburg. In 1589, this German farmer was accused of a decade of unimaginable crimes, mutilations, murders, even cannibalism. Under torture, Stump confessed that he'd made a pact with the devil, receiving a magical belt that let him transform into a wolf at will. He described in gruesome detail how he hunted by moonlight, tearing flesh with his teeth. When the torture ended, Stump's confession sealed his fate. He was executed, broken on the wheel, decapitated, and burned. The crowd cheered, believing they had slain the beast that haunted their countryside. But historians now suspect the truth was far darker. Stump's transformation was forced from him by agony. His confession, a product of terror. He wasn't the only one. Across France, Switzerland, and the Baltic states, dozens of men and women met similar fates. In 1521, Gilles Garnier, the werewolf of Dole, was accused of attacking children in the woods. Like Stump, he admitted under torture to using an ointment that turned him into a wolf. Garnier was burned alive, and his ashes scattered. To the church, these executions weren't just justice, they were exorcisms. But the hysteria had roots deeper than religion. These were eras of war, famine, and plague. Villages were starving. Children vanished in forests, stalked by real wolves. The werewolf gave a face to fear, something the people could punish, something the church could condemn. In their minds, every killer, every outcast, every madman might be a monster in disguise. Even more chilling were the cases where no crime had occurred. In Livonia, modern-day Latvia and Estonia, entire communities claimed to harbor werewolves. Some even confessed willingly, describing themselves as hounds of God who battled witches in the underworld to protect their villages. These strange, self-proclaimed werewolves weren't seen as evil, but as defenders. Yet still, they were tried, beaten and banished. The trials revealed something horrifying about human nature. The wolf wasn't the true monster, fear was. Fear that turned neighbor against neighbor. Fear that made ordinary men torture the innocent. Fear that needed the myth to survive. As the witch hunts died out in the 18th century, the werewolf faded from courtrooms, but the scars remained reminders of how superstition and authority could twist the human mind. In every confession there was pain. In every execution, a lesson. The beast we most fear may not have claws or fangs, but hands and a human face. By the dawn of the 20th century, the witch hunts were over, the torture chambers silent. But the werewolf hadn't vanished, it had transformed. From the ashes of superstition rose a new kind of myth, crafted not by priests or peasants, but by filmmakers. In 1935, Werewolf of London became the first major movie to bring the beast to life on screen, but it was 1941's The Wolf Man that changed everything. Lon Chaney Jr., with his mournful eyes and tortured howl, gave the werewolf something it had never truly had before: humanity. Larry Talbot wasn't a villain, he was a victim, cursed by a bite, doomed to kill those he loved, and powerless against the rising moon. For the first time, audiences didn't just fear the monster, they pitied him. This was the birth of the tragic werewolf, a creature caught between man and beast, forever at war with itself. The silver bullet became the symbol of mercy, the only way to release the cursed from their suffering. The myth that once represented sin and damnation now mirrored something far more modern: the human struggle with inner demons. As horror evolved, so did the wolf. In the 1950 seconds and 60 seconds, Cold War paranoia seeped into the genre. Films like I Was a Teenage Werewolf reflected fears of identity, puberty, and the loss of control. The beast became a metaphor for everything society tried to suppress: rage, sexuality, and primal instinct. Then came the 1980 seconds, the golden age of transformation. An American Werewolf in London and The Howling stunned audiences with groundbreaking effects, showing flesh tearing, bones warping, humanity dissolving in real time. These weren't gentle curses anymore. They were violent metamorphoses. Pain became the price of power. Each generation remade the werewolf to reflect its own fears. In the 2000s, the creature stalked modern suburbs and high schools, from Ginger Snaps to Teen Wolf to Underworld. The legend became sleek, romantic, even seductive. The werewolf was no longer just a monster in the dark. He was the outsider, the misunderstood, the rebel. But underneath the glamour, the same truth endured: the wolf is us. Every story, from medieval trials to modern blockbusters, returns to the same question: what happens when the line between man and beast disappears? When instinct wins? When morality breaks? The silver bullet, in the end, isn't just a weapon. It's a symbol. It reminds us that the monster is human, and the cure, too, is human. Mercy, compassion, understanding, these are what end the curse. And that's what keeps the werewolf legend alive. Because deep down, we all feel the pull of the wild, that small savage whisper in the dark, reminding us that civilization is only a thin layer over something ancient, untamed, and waiting to break free. Even as movies and television reshape the werewolf into a tragic hero or a teen heartthrob, the fascination with the beast has always been deeply psychological. At its core, the werewolf legend taps into a universal human truth. Beneath the surface of civility, a wild, untamed side waits. It's a side of ourselves we try to hide, control, or deny, and yet the stories remind us that it can erupt at any moment. Psychologists suggest the werewolf is the perfect metaphor for suppressed impulses: anger, desire, fear, made flesh. When a person transforms, all restraint falls away. The wolf acts without morality, without consequence, guided only by instinct. For centuries, these stories warned communities about the dangers of giving in to base urges. Today, they give audiences a thrill. What if we let ourselves go? What if the monster inside takes over? Modern portrayals, especially in teen dramas and urban fantasy, explore this duality in depth. Characters like Scott McCall from Teen Wolf balance school, relationships, and their human lives with the chaos of being a werewolf. Their struggles mirror real-life tension between societal expectations and personal desires, between discipline and instinct. It's an internal battle we all recognize, the fight to remain civilized in a world that constantly tests our limits. But the fascination goes beyond personal psychology. Anthropologists argue that werewolf myths arise from humanity's long-standing relationship with predators. Wolves have been both feared and respected for millennia. They hunt in packs, communicate with precision, and strike with lethal efficiency. To become a wolf is to inherit these traits, the ultimate symbol of raw power. For early human societies, tales of transformation served as both caution and inspiration. They warned of danger while hinting at the appeal of strength and freedom beyond human limitations. The wolf also embodies social commentary. Hierarchies within wolf packs, loyalty, and survival instincts became metaphors for human society. Stories of alphas, betas, and lone wolves reflect real social dynamics, power struggles, loyalty conflicts, and the consequences of betrayal. These dynamics resonate in modern narratives, where werewolf packs serve as allegories for friendship, family, and leadership. Interestingly, some scholars suggest that the enduring fear of werewolves is tied to our perception of uncontrollable violence. Unlike vampires, who are often depicted as calculating, the werewolf is instinctive, brutal, and unpredictable. It's a creature driven by emotion rather than reason, a reflection of our deepest anxieties about the uncontrollable forces within ourselves and society. Even in today's fantasy, role-playing games, and horror literature, the werewolf remains a compelling figure because it straddles multiple fears and desires simultaneously. The thrill of power, the horror of losing control, and the tantalizing idea of embracing something forbidden. It's this psychological richness that keeps the legend alive centuries after the last witch hunts and centuries before the next full moon. The werewolf endures because it is more than a monster. It is a mirror, reflecting the hidden depths of the human psyche, a reminder that the line between man and beast is thinner than we might like to believe, and that sometimes the most terrifying predator is the one that walks within.